Hi guys, I decided to do the chapter 1 video again because I've just created this website which I hope you like it, those that have tried it out, and the original chapter 1 video was a poor picture quality. There are a few inconsistencies on it and a little bit of rambling, so I'm going to try and make this more condensed. So this all came about because a few people from Sky Poker approached me and asked me if I could help them coach, and I explained that I'm not really a coach, but I have a style of play, and if people are prepared to adopt that style, then I'm happy to help them with their game. But I'm not a generic coach, so hopefully, if you've read, if you've had a look at, I've done a 3-minute video for an introduction. Um, so, so what is my style? Well, my style is very much going in as the pre-flop aggressor all the time. So I'm raising quite wide, I'm 3-betting quite wide, and I'm not calling. I'm very rarely calling, especially not calling 3-bets. So the guys that approached me, I said, right, okay, well, I'll tell you what to do. I'm going to set you this sort of exercise to pick a few, ideally 6-max turbo tournaments. And on Sky, the players are quite tight. So this strategy is really sort of based against players that are too tight. On other sites, you can still use the strategy, but you adopt it accordingly. So my recommendation was to play some turbos at the end of the night that were 6-handed, and with a general idea that the players are too tight. The odd one might be a bit reckless if he's just going for the pub or something like that, but you can pick those off anyway. So after level 5, my suggestion was to play the first 4 levels as normal, and then after level 5, never call pre-flop. Don't call a raise, don't call a 3-bet. You play either basically raise or fold poker. Okay, so that's all very well. So if you've got a marginal hand like King Queen or something like that, and somebody raises, and you think, well, this is a good hand, I don't want to fold it, but we're not. It's these pretty hands, the King Jack, King Queen suited, stuff like that, that can get you into trouble. So when you've got these hands, either 3-bet or fold. So how do you know whether you want to 3-bet or fold this hand? Well, it depends on your opponent's style. Now, in general, on Sky, I put a coloured label, red, yellow, or green against a player. And for me, though, that means red is an aggressive player, yellow is a steady player, and green is a player that's a tight player. Now, obviously, I have notes as well, because that's a bit sort of restricted just to have those 3 different definitions. But it's a good starting place. So get used to sort of marking your players as red aggro, yellow steady, and green tight, or the other way around if that's what you prefer. But basically something that you understand. To me, red and aggro sort of go together. And green and tight sort of go together in my mind. So we're not calling, and who do we 3-bet then? So let's say it's an early table position raise. We've got a marginal hand, and marginal hand can be anything like from 6-7 suited to Queen 6 suited to rag aces, all these sort of type, low pocket pairs, medium-ish, low medium-ish pocket pairs. All these can be considered marginal hands. So when do we 3-bet these and when do we fold these? Because we're not calling. If it's early table position raise, you may want to let them go. But there isn't really much of a thing when you play six-handed of early table position. So it really does depend on your opponent. Now, if your opponent is an aggressive opener, but he's a guy that folds to 3-bets a lot, which often aggressive openers do because they're opening so wide that they then can't sort of call a 3-bet because they don't want to go into a bloated pot with a marginal hand. So when you're getting raised by these guys and you've got a marginal hand, 3-bet them. If it's a tight guy that has raised you, then just fold these marginal hands, let them go. But I want you to know what it feels like when you always go to the flop as a pre-flop aggressor. I also want you to know what it feels like when you raise when you 3-bet with these marginal hands and get folds, and get used to this fact that actually, God, this isn't bad. I mean, particularly it works well if the table is tight. So how often should we be opening and how often should we be 3-betting? Well, my recommendation is, if the table's tight, that you should be opening about 30% of the time when it comes to you, particularly when you're in the cut-off or the button or the small blind when it comes to you, sort of at least 30% of the time. But the real thing that drives it is that you're looking to get 70% of folds. So if you can open 30% of the time and still get folds 70% of the time, then that's fine. I mean, if you're opening 30 and always getting 3-bet or whatever, then you might have to sort of lower it down. But in general, I'd say sort of open raise 30% of the time when it comes to you, especially in these sort of late table positions. But you're looking to get 70% of folds. If you're not getting set as much as that, then you might need to just open raise not quite so much. If you're getting more than 70% folds, you can go maybe to 35% open. So you're looking particularly to open raise when the players in the blinds are greens, so they're tight players. If they're greens, then that's perfect for stealing there. And you're looking to 3-bet when the guys are reds, provided they're the reds. That meaning that they're aggro. There's two different types of aggro players. You get the aggro players that then fold open wide but fold to 3-bets, and you get the aggro players that get a bit sticky. I think that's the expression that's used, and they call 3-bets and stuff. So those are the ones you're not going to necessarily 3-bet light. You're looking for the guys that often fold to 3-bet. Now, one thing I would say is that people are very used to looking at how often somebody raises and how often somebody 3-bets. And you hear them say, this guy's always opening every hand. He's 3-betting me every time I raise. And what they pay little attention to is how often their opponents fold to 3-bets. Now, in my opinion, that is one of the most important stats, almost more important than how often they raise and how often they 3-bet. How often are they folding to 3-bets? Because you're going to be 3-betting people light. So you need to know this. And you need to be looking at getting folds 70% of the time, whether it's an open raise or whether it's a 3-bet. And get a feel for that. If you're getting more than that, you can step up the aggro because it means the players on the table are tight. If you're getting less than that, you just have to hold back a bit because they're a bit more aggressive. But in general, on these tournaments, particularly on Sky, but if you play other sites, it may be that they're more aggressive. So you adapt it accordingly. You're looking for 70% of folds. So how often you raise and how often you 3-bet is gauged by this sort of 70% criteria that you're trying to achieve. So if you're getting 70% of folds, then straight away that means that your plus EV, your raise is profitable, because even if you lose the other 3, and you're not necessarily going to lose the other 30%, because you may take it down when you're called, and you may also, if you've got a good hand, 4-bet when they 3-bet. But even if you lost those other 3, if you're getting 70% success rate when you're putting in a min raise or just slightly more than a min raise, you're making a profit. So let's say that you are called. So how do you proceed when you're called? Well, I recommend that you proceed. If you proceed when you hit, it's easy. I'll leave that down to you. You kind of know how you're going to play. You might play as a check raise. You might play as a standard C-bet. I'll leave that down to you. But when you miss, I recommend C-betting against one opponent if it's a dry flop. So a dry flop meaning, like, say, King 6-2 Rainbow would be a very dry flop. So say you've raised with a rag ace, you haven't hit, but then you C-bet. And when you C-bet the pot on dry board, you probably want to be looking at about 40%. And if it's a wet board, you probably want to be looking a little bit bigger. But in general, wet boards, if you've missed, you're probably not going to be C-betting so much. So you C-bet dry boards when you've only got one opponent, pretty much most of the time, when you haven't got it. Now, obviously you adjust this, because if you're getting somebody that's playing a resistance style, i.e. that they know how you play and they're going to call you just to float on the flop and reassess on the turn and then try and take it away when you shut down. So if they're doing that, then you may not C-bet. But in general, if we're talking about players that are too tight, they're going to fold. If they've called your raise, they're going to fold if they've missed. So that's where you're betting. Try and keep all your raise sizes consistent. Okay, even before the flop, when you open raise, at the early stages, say on Sky, like they start off at 10-20, so you can raise 3x. When it's 15-30, you can raise 3x. When it goes to 51, you might just want to do, 2.5. So you might want to do 250. When it goes to 61-20, you might want to do 140. 75-150, you might want to do 330. when it gets to 100, 200, you might want to do 420 or 440. And then after that, maybe a min raise is sufficient because there's no antes on Sky. If you're on other sites with antes, then I probably would like go to 2.2 and sort of stay there. Don't then go to a min raise when there's antes. But the important thing is you keep these bet sizes consistent because you don't want to give anything away about your hand strength based on your bet size. And the same is true with your continuation bets. Now, obviously, I do vary my continuation bet, but it's usually based on board texture rather than my hand. So I might see bet less. Say I might see bet only 35% on a dry board, and I might see bet 50% on a wet board. But I'm probably not betting. But when I see bet with a wet board, it's probably when I've got top pair or something like that. But also, I mean, I sometimes get called half pot Harry on Sky because I go into auto drive and just see bet half the pot, whatever the flop, whatever the board, whatever the texture, whatever hand I've got, half the pot. And there is merit into doing this because they really can't gauge anything about what type of hand you've got, whether it's a bluff, whether it's a semi-bluff, whether it's just a standard continuation bet, whether you've hit it, by the size of your bet. So that's worth putting into consideration. So I think that's, yeah. So we're looking to open raise against tight players when there's tight players in the blinds. We're looking to 3-bet against aggressive players that fold 3-bets a lot. If a tight player's raised, you've got a marginal hand, you just let it go. Now, obviously in the first few levels, you can set mine, you can do things with suited connectors if you want to. But what we're talking about is in these turbo tournaments, go quite quick, level 5 onwards, the blinds are probably up to sort of, I don't know, 75, 150 or something by level 5. And you can start, adopting this. I'm not calling, and I'm not calling 3-bets. I'm opening wide, I'm 3-betting light against the right opponents. So that's the exercise that I've set. Now when I play, I've spoken a bit about sort of my alternative strategy, and people say, well, is it really alternative sort of strategy? A lot of people play aggressively like this. Well, I go to the flop as the pre-flop aggressor 95% of the time. So that means when you go to flop, there's at least 2 players in, obviously, and 95%, so 19 times out of 20, the pre-flop aggressor is me. So I must be having a pretty unique style, because if I've got someone like me on the table, we never go to a flop, because they're 3-betting or they're 4-betting or they're folding. So we sometimes, obviously, early stages, particularly when you're super deep, maybe, but in general, and the latter stages and the later it gets, we're very unlikely to see a flop. So when I do see a flop, I'm the pre-flop aggressor, and 95% of the time, that pre-flop aggressor is me. So it is a very unique style. Not everybody. If everybody's playing that way, then we would never see flops. So now, if you're going to adopt this, some people may already play similarly, and it won't be too hard for you. But if you're a player that's used to calling 3-bets, calling ranges, playing down the streets, it'll be very alien to you because you're playing a much more high variance game before the flop. Now, I think that this is a very profitable sort of approach to take, but it will be out of some people's comfort zone, so it might take a little bit of getting used to. And that's why I recognise at the end of the session, at the end of the night, have a few games, preferably in a turbo tournament, the blind's going up quite quick. After level 5, give it a go as practice and see how to incorporate it. And hopefully you can get more and more confident with how you play. Now, the important thing is if you're going to play these tournaments at the end of the night and you're going to try this new strategy, that one, because you never call in, never fold in, it's an exercise, obviously. So the money that you put in for the tournament, you want to count that as lost, really. So make sure you got the bankroll for it. That's an important thing. If you haven't got, obviously the problem is if you play really, really cheap tournaments, then it doesn't mean anything to players, and they're going all in, and your strategy won't work because it's if you're playing a $1 turbo or £1 turbo, then players, it doesn't matter enough, and so they're not going to play in a way that it's not going to be a good experience of you to try and do it. So you really want to look at the £11 ones as a sort of standard on Sky. But count that money as lost, and you have to be, if you can't afford or you haven't got the bankroll to do that, then don't do it. Anyhow, best of luck. This is a video to replace the last one. It's more condensed. Hopefully it gives you an idea about what the style is about and that you can give it a go. Hope you like the new website. Please do give some feedback on it, on the videos if you can, in the comments field, because that's the only way that we really know sort of which videos are really helpful to people and which ones aren't. So if you could provide that feedback, it would be much appreciated. And best of luck to you all. There's a group of us that have, or group of players that have been following my sort of pointings on this, and they've had some really good results, and things are looking good and promising for them. And I want to wish you all the best of luck, and thanks for tuning in to these videos and the website. I hope you like it and I hope it's useful for you in the coming months. Thanks a lot. I'll put out now and again new posts, and if you subscribe, then you'll be notified when the new posts come out. So best of luck at the tables, guys. All the best.